For centuries, the words of Daniel remained sealed. God himself commanded it. Daniel 12:4 records it with a precision that sends a chill down the spine. But you, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end. Sealed. Not lost, not destroyed. Deliberately sealed. Kept for a specific generation, for an exact moment in history that God had already calculated before that moment existed. And what few have understood is that this seal was not placed forever. It was placed until the time of the end, which means there is a moment when that seal opens. And the signs that Daniel described more than 2,500 years ago are happening right now, in this very instant, with an accuracy that no human being could have fabricated. There was something different about that man from the very beginning, something those around him could sense, but not explain. When Nebuchadnezzar, the most powerful king of the known world, ordered that the finest young men from conquered nations be brought to Babylon to be educated in the wisdom and language of the Chaldeans, Daniel was among them. He was perhaps 14 or 15 years old. He was a Hebrew boy, torn from Jerusalem in the year 605 before Christ during the first Babylonian deportation, separated from his family, from his land, from his temple, from everything that constituted his identity, carried in chains to the largest and most imposing city of the ancient world, the city of the hanging gardens, of the ziggurats that touched the sky, of the priests of Marduk, who read destiny in the entrails of animals and in the movement of the stars, a city that breathed idolatry through every one of its pores. And in the midst of that environment, designed to erase every trace of faithfulness to the God of Israel, Daniel made a decision that would define the rest of his life. Daniel 1:8 records it with a simplicity that conceals a monumental depth. But Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's delicacies, nor with the wine which he drank. He purposed in his heart. He did not announce it with shouts. He did not organize a rebellion. He did not make a political declaration. He made an interior decision, silent, radical, that no Babylonian law could force and no royal decree could buy. And it was precisely that interior decision, that determination not to be defiled, that opened the door through which everything else entered. Because there is something that the story of Daniel teaches from its very first chapter that is fundamental to understanding the prophecies that would come afterward. God did not reveal the secrets of the future to a man who sought power. He revealed them to a man who sought purity. He revealed them to someone who, in the moment when he could have yielded, when yielding would have been the most convenient, the safest, the most intelligent thing from a purely human perspective, chose to remain firm. Daniel 1:17 records the consequence of that decision with words that resound through the centuries. As for these 4 young men, God gave them knowledge and skill in all literature and wisdom, and Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. That understanding in visions and dreams was not a natural talent. It wasn't the result of years of study in the Babylonian academies. It was a gift, a specific gift, granted by a specific God to a man who had made a specific decision. And that gift was about to reveal itself in a way that would shake the foundations of the most powerful empire on earth. Daniel's first encounter with prophecy did not begin with a vision of his own. It began with a nightmare from a king. Nebuchadnezzar had dreamed something that disturbed him to the very depths of his being. Genesis 41 had shown a similar pattern, when the Pharaoh of Egypt had dreams that no wise man of his court could interpret, until a Hebrew prisoner revealed their meaning. Now, centuries later, the pattern repeated itself in Babylon. The king summoned his magicians, his astrologers, his diviners, all the representatives of the most advanced system of knowledge in the pagan world, and demanded that they tell him not only the meaning of the dream, but the dream itself. Because Nebuchadnezzar suspected something. He suspected that if he told the dream, any charlatan with sufficient creativity could invent an interpretation. But if someone could tell him what he had dreamed without him revealing it, then that someone had access to a knowledge that no human being possessed by their own means. Daniel 2:10 and 11 record the desperate response of the Babylonian wise men. There is not a man on earth who can tell the king's matter, for no king, lord, or ruler has ever asked such things of any magician, astrologer, or Chaldean. The thing that the king asks is difficult, and there is no other who can tell it to the king except the gods, whose dwelling is not with flesh, admitting it without knowing it, recognizing without intending to, that what the king needed was not in the hands of men, but in the hands of God. Nebuchadnezzar ordered the execution of all the wise men of Babylon, all of them, including Daniel and his companions. When the captain of the royal guard came to find them, Daniel did not panic. He did not flee. He did not beg for mercy. Daniel 2:14 says that Daniel answered with counsel and wisdom to Arioch, the king's captain of the guard. He asked for time. He went to his house. He gathered his companions. And what they did in that moment reveals the spiritual architecture upon which all the prophetic revelations that would come afterward were built. Daniel 2:17 and 18 record that moment. So Daniel went to his house and informed his companions, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, so that they might seek mercies from the God of heaven concerning this secret, so that Daniel and his companions might not perish with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. They prayed. In the heart of the most powerful pagan kingdom on earth, 4 young Hebrews knelt before the invisible God and asked him to reveal what no human being could know. And God answered. Daniel 2:19 says that the secret was revealed to Daniel in a night vision. It was revealed at night, in the silence, in the stillness, far from the noise and pomp of the Babylonian palaces, as God has always done, revealing the greatest things in the quietest moments to the most surrendered hearts. What Daniel saw that night was the first of the 7 prophecies that structure the book that bears his name, and which theologians and historians have spent centuries studying with a fascination that has not diminished. It was the vision of a great statue, a colossal image of terrifying appearance, whose head was of fine gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, and its feet partly of iron and partly of baked clay. And while Daniel was looking at that statue in the vision, a stone was cut without human hands, and it struck the feet of iron and clay and shattered them, and the whole statue crumbled and became like dust that the wind carried away without leaving a trace. But the stone that struck the statue grew and became a great mountain that filled the whole earth. Daniel 2:31 through 35 contains that vision in its entirety, and what makes this prophecy extraordinary is not only what it predicted, but the precision with which it has been fulfilled in the course of human history over the last 25 centuries. The interpretation that Daniel gave the king is one of the most verifiable prophetic documents in all of ancient religious literature. The head of gold represented Nebuchadnezzar himself and the Babylonian Empire. Daniel 2:38 establishes it with absolute clarity. You are this head of gold. Babylon fell in the year 539 before Christ, exactly as the prophecy indicated, when the Medes and Persians under the command of Cyrus the Great took the city in a single night. The chest and arms of silver represented precisely that Medo-Persian empire that succeeded Babylon, an inferior material to gold, just as the text indicates that the next kingdom would be inferior to the first. The belly and thighs of bronze represented the Greek empire of Alexander the Great, who conquered the known world with a speed that history had never seen and would never see again until someone different would arise. The legs of iron represented Rome, the empire that divided the world into 2 great branches, just like the 2 legs of the statue. the Western Roman Empire and the Eastern Roman Empire. And the feet of iron mixed with baked clay represent something that many biblical scholars identify as the final stage of the human world order, a mixture of strength and fragility, of unity and division, that the text itself describes as a kingdom that will be partly strong and partly fragile, as iron does not mix with clay. Daniel 2:43. And in the days of these kings, says Daniel 2:44, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. There are scholars who see in the description of the feet mixed with clay an image that resonates in an unsettling way with the current world. The contemporary world order presents exactly that combination that the text describes: democracies and autocracies, superpowers with nuclear arsenals capable of destroying the planet, and nations so fragile that a natural disaster can topple them. Global governance systems like the United Nations that attempt to create unity without ever fully achieving it, exactly like the iron and clay that never finish mixing. And in the midst of that scenario, the stone that was not cut with human hands remains the element that historians, philosophers, and political analysts cannot explain or contain within their systems of understanding. Because the stone of Daniel does not represent a political movement or a human ideology. It represents something completely different, something that no nation has managed to build and no war has been able to destroy. But the first prophecy was only the beginning, because what would come afterward, in the following chapters of the book of Daniel, would deepen with a precision that defies any rational explanation, that does not include the possibility of an intelligence that transcends time. And the second of the 7 prophecies would lead Daniel to contemplate something that would make even the vision of the great statue pale by comparison. 4 beasts rising from a stormy sea, one like a lion with eagle wings, another like a bear with 3 ribs in its mouth, another like a leopard with 4 heads and 4 wings, and a 4th beast, different from all the others, dreadful and terrible and exceedingly strong, with great iron teeth that devoured and broke in pieces and trampled the residue with its feet. And among its 10 horns arose a little horn, with eyes like a man and a mouth speaking great things. Daniel 7:3-8, a vision that has spent centuries being interpreted, debated, and studied, and that contains details that only someone who could see the future would have been able to write. The second prophecy of Daniel arrived in the first year of the reign of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, approximately in the year 553 before Christ. 12 years had passed since the vision of the great statue. Daniel was already a mature man, a high-ranking official in the imperial court, someone who had survived changes of regime, palace conspiracies, and had emerged unharmed from a lion's den under circumstances that no natural explanation can describe in a satisfactory way. But what he saw on that night of the year 553 disturbed him in a way that nothing previous had managed to. Daniel 7:15 records it with an honesty that is disturbing precisely because it comes from a man accustomed to divine revelations. My spirit was distressed in the midst of my body, and the visions of my head alarmed me. The visions of his head alarmed him. The man who had calmed the anguish of an all-powerful king with the serenity of one who knows his God was now alarmed by the visions of his own head, which means that what he was seeing surpassed everything he had seen before. The 4 beasts that emerged from the sea in this second prophecy represent the same 4 empires that the statue of chapter 2 described, but seen from a completely different perspective. From God's perspective, the great human empires are not shining statues of precious metals. They are beasts that emerge from chaos. The sea in the prophecy is not simply a body of water. In biblical symbolism, the sea represents the chaos of the nations. the instability of human systems, the perpetual agitation of peoples who build and destroy civilizations with the same ease with which the waves of the sea rise and fall. And from that chaos arise beasts, not heroes, not brilliant architects of civilization. Beasts. The difference between the human perspective and the divine perspective on the great empires of history is compressed in that difference between chapters 2 and 7 of Daniel. Men see glory. God sees ferocity. Men build monuments. God observes the iron teeth that tear at the weak. The fourth beast of this vision has concentrated the attention of biblical prophecy scholars for centuries. It was dreadful and terrible and exceedingly strong, says Daniel 7:7. It had great iron teeth. It devoured and broke in pieces. It trampled the residue with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that preceded it, and it had 10 horns. Theologians have historically identified this fourth beast with Rome, the empire that succeeded Greece, and was characterized precisely by that combination of devastating military power and organizational capacity that crushed everything it encountered in its path. But the description of the 10 horns and the little horn that arises among them has generated a theological discussion that has gone on for centuries without being exhausted. Because if the 4 metals of the statue and the 4 beasts of chapter 7 are the same 4 empires seen from the different perspectives, then the description of the little horn that arises from the 10 horns of the fourth beast points toward something that has not yet occurred in human history as we know it, something that would come after Rome, something that would emerge from the space Rome left when it fell, and that is still emerging. Daniel 7:8 describes that horn with details that have been the subject of study for generations. I was considering the horns, and there was another horn, a little one, coming up among them, before whom 3 of the first horns were plucked out by the roots. And there, in this horn, were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking pompous words. Eyes like the eyes of a man, a mouth speaking pompous words. Theologians have interpreted these elements in diverse ways throughout the centuries, but there is a constant that emerges from all serious interpretations. This horn represents an entity of extraordinary power that arises in the last times, that opposes God with unprecedented arrogance, and that appears invincible until the moment when the Ancient of Days takes his seat and the books are opened. Daniel 7, 9, and 10 contain one of the most impressive visions of divine glory in all of the Old Testament. I watched till thrones were put in place, and the Ancient of Days was seated. His garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head was like pure wool. His throne was a fiery flame, its wheels a burning fire. A fiery stream issued and came forth from before him. 1,000 thousands ministered to him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The judge took his seat, and the books were opened. The third prophecy of Daniel arrived 2 years later, in the year 551 before Christ, during the reign of Belshazzar. It was in the palace of Shushan, in the province of Elam, beside the river Ulai. Daniel 8:3-4 describes what he saw when he lifted up his eyes. A ram which had 2 horns, and the 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher one came up last. The ram was pushing westward, northward, and southward. No animal could withstand him, nor was there any that could deliver from his hand. He did according to his will, and became great. But while Daniel was considering the vision, suddenly a male goat came from the west, across the surface of the whole earth, without touching the ground. It had a notable horn between its eyes. He came to the ram. He was moved with rage against him. He struck the ram. He threw him down to the ground and trampled on him. And there was no one who could deliver the ram from his hand. The male goat grew very great, but when he became strong, the large horn was broken. and in place of it, 4 notable ones came up toward the 4 winds of heaven. What makes this third prophecy extraordinary is that Daniel received the interpretation directly from the angel Gabriel, identified by name in Daniel 8:16, the first time that an angel is identified by name in all of biblical scripture. And Gabriel was specific, with a precision that defies any explanation that is not supernatural. The ram with 2 horns, he told Daniel, were the kings of Media and Persia. The male goat that came from the west was the king of Greece. Daniel 8:20 and 21. The prophecy was written in the year 551 before Christ. The Medo-Persian Empire existed at that time as the dominant power of the known world. Greece was a collection of city-states that was barely beginning to develop democracy and philosophy. And yet Daniel described with accuracy the lightning-fast victory of Greece over Persia, described the characteristic that would make that military campaign famous: its superhuman speed, the male goat that came across the face of the whole earth without touching the ground, and described what would happen to the king of Greece at the moment of his greatest strength. The large horn was broken. Alexander the Great died in Babylon in the year 323 before Christ, at 32 years of age, at the peak of his power, without having suffered a single military defeat in his entire life. And his empire, exactly as Daniel had prophesied, was divided among his 4 main generals, the Diadochi, toward the 4 winds of heaven. The 4th prophecy of Daniel is possibly the most detailed and the most documentarily verifiable in all of the Old Testament. It is found in chapter 11 and spans from the time of the Persian kings to what scholars call the time of the end. What makes this prophecy especially impactful for historians is that its description of the period between 530 and 165 before Christ is so precise, so detailed, so closely aligned with verifiable historical facts, that for centuries, critics argued that the book of Daniel could not have been written in the 6th century before Christ, but must have been composed after the events described had already occurred. The irony is that this same argument, raised as a criticism against the authenticity of the book, ends up being the most powerful argument in its favor. Because if the book was written when the critics argue it was written, after the year 165 before Christ, then the prophecies that point toward the future from that point, those that describe the time of the end, cannot be explained by any reason other than divine revelation. There is no middle ground. Either Daniel wrote before, and everything he described was fulfilled afterward, which makes the book a genuine prophecy, or he wrote afterward, and everything he describes toward the future remains a genuine prophecy that still awaits its fulfillment. In either case, the theological conclusion is the same. Daniel 11:32 through 35 describes something that scholars identify with the period of the persecution of the Seleucid king Antiochus IV, epiphanies against the Jewish people between the years 175 and 164 before Christ. This ruler desecrated the Temple of Jerusalem, abolished the daily sacrifices, installed a statue of Zeus in the Holy of Holies, and forced the Jews to worship pagan gods under penalty of death. The books of Maccabees record this period with a level of historical detail that confirms Daniel's predictions, point by point. But what makes this section of Daniel 11 especially significant for understanding the signs of the time of the end is that the events of the 2nd century before Christ are presented by experts in biblical prophecy as a type, a foreshadowing of something greater that will occur in the last times. Jesus himself in Matthew 24:15 quotes directly from Daniel when speaking of the signs that will precede the end. Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, let the reader understand. Jesus, speaking approximately in the year 30 after Christ, cited Daniel as a prophecy that was still to be fulfilled, which means that what Daniel described in chapter 11 was not exhausted with Antiochus Epiphanes, There is a greater fulfillment that still awaits. And it was during those hours of vision and revelation that Daniel understood something that made him weep, something that made him pray for weeks, something that revealed that the plan of God was greater, longer, and more surprising than any previous generation had understood. Because God was not only showing him what was going to happen, he was showing him the why. And the why of all the prophecies of Daniel points toward the same destination, toward the same moment, toward the same reality that the stone of chapter 2 represented when it grew until it filled the whole earth. And that moment, according to what the biblical text describes, is closer than the world imagines. The fifth prophecy of Daniel arrived in the year 539 before Christ. It was the year Babylon fell, the year that Cyrus the Great of Persia entered through the gates of the most powerful city in the world, while the last Babylonian king celebrated a banquet. Daniel 5 records that night with a dramatism that no fiction writer could have invented. Belshazzar the king made a great feast for 1,000 of his lords. He ordered that the gold and silver vessels that his father had taken from the temple of Jerusalem be brought so that they might drink from them. They praised the gods of gold and silver, bronze and iron, wood and stone. They profaned the sacred vessels of the God of Israel to render worship to idols that could neither see, nor hear, nor speak. And it was in that precise moment, in the midst of the celebration and the blasphemy, that the fingers of a man's hand appeared and wrote on the plaster of the wall of the king's palace. Daniel 5:5. Only the fingers, only the hand, writing on the wall with a clarity that everyone could see and that no one could read. The king's countenance changed. His thoughts troubled him. The joints of his hips were loosened and his knees knocked against each other. Daniel 5:6. The most powerful king on earth, surrounded by his princes and his concubines, and his wine and his music, was reduced in seconds to a man trembling on his knees, because an invisible hand wrote 4 words on a wall. Mene, Mene, Tekel, Upharsin. Daniel interpreted them that same night. Mene, God has numbered your kingdom and finished it. Tekel, you have been weighed in the balances and found wanting. Upharsin, your kingdom has been divided and given to the Medes and Persians. That very night Belshazzar, king of the Chaldeans, was slain, and Darius the Mede received the kingdom. Daniel 5:30 and 31, the prophecy and its fulfillment, separated by hours. But the fifth prophecy that bears Daniel's name as its author is not the vision of the banquet of Belshazzar. It is the one that arrived in the first year of Darius the Mede, the prophecy of the 70 weeks. Daniel 9. It is the prophecy that biblical scholars call the axis of prophetic time, the backbone around which all eschatological thought, in both the Old and the New Testament, is organized, and what it contains, analyzed with the precision it deserves, produces an impact that has not diminished in more than 2 millennia of study. Daniel was reading the book of Jeremiah when he understood that the captivity of Jerusalem would last 70 years. He understood that that time was coming to its end, and instead of simply waiting, he set his face toward the Lord God to make request by prayer and supplications, with fasting, sackcloth, and ashes, and confessed his sins and the sins of his people with a humility that rarely appears in Scripture in such a raw and open form. Daniel 9:3-19 contains that prayer, and it is one of the most profound intercession texts in all of the biblical canon. And it was while he was praying that the angel Gabriel arrived, flying swiftly. The text says, and brought him the answer. Not the answer Daniel was asking for, an answer that went far beyond. Daniel 9:24-27 contains the prophecy of the 70 weeks in its entirety. 70 weeks are determined for your people and for your holy city, to finish the transgression, to make an end of sins, to make reconciliation for iniquity, to to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. 70 weeks of years, in the prophetic counting system that scholars call the sabbatical years, prophecy, equal 490 years. The text establishes a precise starting point, from the going forth of the command to restore and build Jerusalem. Historians have identified that decree with the one issued by Artaxerxes III in the year 444 before Christ, recorded in Nehemiah 2:1-8. From that point, according to the prophecy, there would be 69 weeks of years, that is 483 years, until the coming of Messiah the Prince. If the prophetic year of 360 days is applied, which is the standard of the biblical calendar, and calculated from the 1st of Nisan of the year 444 before Christ, the result falls on a date that historians identify with the triumphal entry of Jesus of Nazareth into Jerusalem, the one the Gospels call the triumphal entry, the Sunday before his crucifixion. This precision has been documented by multiple scholars throughout the centuries, including the English mathematician and theologian Sir Robert Anderson in his work, The Coming Prince, published in 1895. The prophecy of the 70 weeks predicted with mathematical accuracy the date of the public presentation of the Messiah, 500 years before it occurred. But the prophecy does not end at the 69th week. Daniel 9:26 adds something that shook the theological world when it was understood in its full implication. And after the 62 weeks, Messiah shall be cut off, but not for himself. After the 69 weeks, the Messiah would be cut off, killed, not for himself, but by the will of God and for the sin of humanity. What theologians identify as a direct prediction of the crucifixion. And the people of the Prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. In the year 70 after Christ, the Roman general Titus destroyed Jerusalem and the temple, exactly as this prophecy anticipated. And the end of it shall be with a flood. Until the end of the war, desolations are determined. And then comes the 70th week, the last week, the one that has not yet been fulfilled, the one that many scholars identify as the final tribulation period that the book of Revelation describes with an intensity that paralyzes even the most experienced reader. The sixth prophecy of Daniel is found in chapters 10, 11, and 12, and arrived in the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia, approximately in the year 536 before Christ. Daniel had fasted for 3 full weeks. No pleasant food, no meat, no wine, no anointing with oil. Daniel 10:2-3. And at the end of those 3 weeks of fasting, standing on the bank of the great river Hiddekel, he lifted his eyes and saw a figure that left him without strength. A certain man clothed in linen, whose waist was girded with gold of Uphaz. His body was like beryl, his face like the appearance of lightning, his eyes like torches of fire, his arms and feet like burnished bronze in color, and the sound of his words like the voice of a multitude. Daniel 10:5-6. The men who were with him did not see the vision, but a great terror fell upon them, and they fled. Daniel was left alone before that figure, without strength, with no vigor remaining in him, and the voice of the heavenly being told him something that reveals a dimension of spiritual reality that most contemporary believers rarely contemplate. From the first day that you set your heart to understand and to humble yourself before your God, your words were heard, and I have come because of your words. But the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days. Daniel 10:12-13. A spiritual being was sent from heaven the moment Daniel began to pray, and was held back for 21 days by an entity called the Prince of the Kingdom of Persia, until Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help. What Daniel 10 describes is not only the story of a man who fasted beside a river. It is a window into the spiritual conflict that operates behind the political structures of the nations. The princes of the nations that the text mentions are not human rulers. They are spiritual entities that influence the systems of earthly power. And that conflict, that battle that Daniel witnessed in vision, is happening right now, behind the curtain of the events that the world's newscasts describe every day as political, economic, and military conflicts. What this sixth prophecy revealed about the time of the end is of a specificity that defies any superficial analysis. Daniel 11 describes with a precision that leaves historians speechless a series of conflicts between the king of the north and the king of the south that extends from the Persian period to what the text calls the time appointed for the end. And in verse 40 of chapter 11, the prophecy makes a transition that scholars identify as the leap into the last times. At the time of the end, the king of the south shall attack him, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots, horsemen, and with many ships. Daniel 11:40. The time of the end, not the time of Antiochus Epiphanes, not the time of the Seleucids and the Ptolemies, the time of the end, a period that the biblical text describes with specific signs that any honest observer can compare with the current state of the world. The seventh and final prophecy of Daniel is found in chapter 12. It is the briefest, it is the most cryptic, and it is possibly the most urgent. Daniel 12:1 opens it with words that resound with an intensity that increases rather than diminishes as time passes. At that time, Michael shall stand up, the great prince who stands watch over the sons of your people. And there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation, even to that time. And at that time your people shall be delivered, everyone who is found, written in the book. And many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, some to shame and everlasting contempt. Daniel 12:1 and 2. The angel described a period of trouble without precedent in human history. Not a trouble like the flood, not a trouble like the Babylonian exile, a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation even to that time. A phrase that Jesus himself repeated in Matthew 24:21 when he said that there will be great tribulation, such as hasn't been since the beginning of the world until this time. No, nor ever shall be. The coincidence between the language of Daniel and the language of Jesus is not accidental. Jesus was quoting Daniel, confirming that the seventh prophecy of Daniel points toward a future event that no previous generation has witnessed. But then the angel gave Daniel something that makes this seventh prophecy the most directly relevant for the generation living in this moment. After describing the period of tribulation, Daniel asked, "How long shall the fulfillment of these wonders be?" Daniel 12:8. And the answer he received contained a detail that for centuries remained incomprehensible, and that suddenly, in the 20th century, acquired a meaning that has no precedent in all of the history of biblical interpretation. Many shall be purified, made white and refined, but the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand. And from the time that the daily sacrifice is taken away, and the abomination of desolation is set up, there shall be 1,290 days. Blessed is he who waits and comes to the 1,335 days. Daniel 12:10 through 12. And then, in verse 4 of that same chapter 12, a phrase that has drawn the attention of generations of scholars. But you, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase. Many shall run to and fro. Knowledge shall increase. Those two phrases, written in the 6th century before Christ, describe with astonishing precision two phenomena that define the contemporary world in an exclusive way. The massive movement of people across the planet, the human mobility that, in the 20th and 21st centuries, has reached levels that no previous generation could have imagined, and the explosion of scientific and technological knowledge that has occurred in the last 150 years, accelerated from the Industrial Revolution onward, and that in the 21st century is advancing at a speed that scientists themselves describe as exponential. The physicist Buckminster Fuller developed in the 20th century what he called the knowledge curve. He calculated that until the year 1900, human knowledge doubled approximately every 100 years. By 1945, it doubled every 25 years. By 1982, every 12 to 13 months. And in the early years of the 21st century, according to experts in information technology, human knowledge doubles every 12 hours in certain areas of learning. 12 hours. What Daniel described as knowledge shall increase was not a vague philosophical observation. It was a specific sign that would mark the time of the end. And we are living in that time. The 7 prophecies of Daniel converge toward a point, not toward a date on a calendar, toward a condition of the world, a condition that includes the return of the Jewish people to their land, which occurred in 1948, the first time in nearly 2,000 years. A condition that includes the reunification of Jerusalem under Israeli sovereignty, which occurred in 1967. A condition that includes the rise of a world order that combines iron and clay, power and fragility, unprecedented technology and unprecedented instability. A condition that includes the explosion of knowledge and the massive movement of people. A condition that includes the perpetual conflict in the Middle East, in the very region that Daniel and all the prophets identified as the geographic center of the last times. And in the midst of all that, there is a reality that the book of Daniel affirms with a consistency that does not vary from the first chapter to the last. The kingdom that shall never be destroyed. The stone that was not cut with human hands. The Ancient of Days, who takes his seat on his throne. The Son of Man coming with the clouds of heaven. Daniel 7:13 and 14. Then to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom, the one which shall not be destroyed. The prophecies of Daniel do not end in catastrophe. They end in reign. They end in the victory of the one whose name Daniel did not pronounce, but whose coming he announced with a precision that history has been confirming step by step, century by century, event by event. And if everything that has already been fulfilled was fulfilled with accuracy, then what still remains to be fulfilled will be fulfilled with the same accuracy. That is what makes these prophecies not relics of a distant past. They are signs of an imminent future. They are the map that God drew so that those who live in the time of the end can know where they are standing, and to know that the seal was placed until the time of the end means that in the time of the end, the seal opens, that the words of Daniel are being understood now as they have never been understood before, and that if there is a generation that holds in its hands the responsibility to read that book with open eyes, it is the generation living in this precise moment of history. If this revelation touched something inside you, if at any moment while you were hearing the story of Daniel, you felt that God was speaking directly to you, that the prophecies he wrote 2,500 years ago have something to say to you today, then there is something you can do right now. Give this video a like so that more people can discover what the book of Daniel reveals about the time in which we live. Subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell so that you do not miss any of the stories that God has prepared for you to understand. And leave a comment telling us which of the 7 prophecies of Daniel impacted you the most. Which one you feel has the most connection to what is happening in the world right now. Because every comment, every like, every subscription is a way of carrying the Word of God to someone who perhaps today needs to know that history is not out of control, that there is a God who sealed a book until the time of the end, that time has come, and that the seal is open.